let me introduce you, nice smell, to another component of the guitar, this time the sides. In contrast to the back, we've got some lovely straight grain going on here, so hopefully fairly well behaved. Possibly this piece is better behaved than this piece because it seems to be a little bit rough from the table saw, not my table saw. But that's fine, we can get rid of all of that. We're going to be taking this down to 2mm, so we've got plenty to work with. We've got a couple of insect holes at the end, not ideal, but we can lose pretty much the whole of this end here, really. This piece is a lot thicker, which is fortunate, although bits of it aren't quite so thick. It gets a little bit thin here, but we're okay. We got plenty to work with. So we'll go on to the drum sander. We'll do the top. I haven't got the top in my little conservatory workshop because my experience of the front was that as soon as you take a nice warm piece of wood from indoors and place it on the cold slab of the drum sander, the stainless steel surface of the drum sander, it tends to cup. So we're just going to go straight into the drum sander, and then hopefully we won't have the same problems that we had with the front, where we've got a little bit of cupping to cope with. It's now 2 days since I did that intro because I waited to see whether the cupping in this rather rough piece changed, and it hasn't. I've got about 1.2mm of cupping here, which I'm going to try to sand out. But because I haven't got much thickness to work with, I'm going to go down to 2mm, and I've only got about 3.5mm to play with. So this is going to be very close, and it's possible I might not be able to get 2 good sides. So normally taking cupping out of a board is not a problem. You go through concave side down, and you flatten the top and you get a good edge on the convex side. You then flip it and you do the concave side, and it all comes out really nicely, and it's stable because clearly concave down, it's nice and stable in the drum sander. You then flatten this face, flip it over, it's all stable. I'm going to have to do it going through the drum sander like this to begin with, and it's going to have a little bit of a wobble. The reason for this is because if I did it how I've just described, flattening this side first, I'm going to end up with a nice perfect side here, but it could be very thin in the middle. So when I then flip it over, it's going to be standing proud at the edges. I'm going to be taking material away here, and what might happen is I haven't got enough thickness in the middle to work with, and I end up with a middle that has low spots on it and has saw marks. This face here is not a very good face. Let me show you. It's got lots of saw marks in it. I think what's happened is this is the final board that came off the plank. The outside of the plank was table sawn, whereas the other boards that come off, they've all been band sawed, and it's actually a very good surface to begin with. It's actually quite smooth. It may have actually been through a sander or a planer possibly to tidy it up, but I'm going to struggle to get these saw marks out, I think, due to the lack of thickness. Of course, I'm going to be throwing this end away anyway, and I'm going to be taking material off the ends. But to come back to my point, if I was to start by flattening that side first, potentially I could end up with a line down the middle with low spots on it or saw marks. Now clearly that would have to be on the inside of the guitar, and what we'd have is we'd have an area of weakness down the middle of the sides, which is not good. But if we start by flattening the wobbly side, not ideal, but I think it should be stable going through the drum sander. If we get this surface good, which is the bad surface with all the saw marks in it, then when we flip it over, we will be starting with a thin edge down each side. So if we don't quite have enough thickness, we will be taking material off the middle and leaving the edges. And if we don't have enough thickness, we'll end up with any thin spots being on the edges, which will either get cut away or they will be hidden by the kerfing, because clearly we want to put that on the inside of the guitar, and the linings of the guitar, somebody call it kerfing, technically they're actually called linings, the kerfing is the saw cuts. The linings would cover any low spots on the outside. I'm hoping it won't come to that. I'm hoping we will get a perfect 2mm board out of this, but I think it's worth thinking about these things. So I'm going to attack the concave, I always have to think about this, the concave side first, get that flat and then flip it. Actually, it'll be a 4-stage process. I'll get 50% of this done so that it creates a nice flat surface to then do 50% of this edge, which will be taking most of the material away from the middle. At least that will then make the board a little bit more stable because it will have a flat spot down the middle. We then go back to the other side, get that completely flat and perfect. We then flip it back over and finish off the convex side and hopefully get a perfectly uniform board. I don't think we're going to be able to get these really deep marks out here, but that doesn't really matter because we can't use this end anyway because of the insect hole. So that's the plan. My drum sander has this rather nifty adjuster. I don't know what machine this came off, but it's a very useful thing. It's calibrated 0 to 20, well, 0 to 15, and then you're back to 0. So there's 20 gradations around the circumference. So if I turn from 5 to 10, I don't think you can see that, but that's 10. That's a quarter of a turn. This is a 1.5mm thread, but 1.5mm translates to 0.75mm thickness at the drum, because it's going up 1.5mm here, but only half that in the middle of the platter. So a quarter of a turn is about 0.18 of a millimetre, and I'm happy initially just to go a quarter of a turn. I could go more. But what I find is when I'm getting down to the final thickness, I'll go even finer, just 1/8 of a turn, so I'm only going 0.1 of a millimetre at a time, or 0.9. That's how that works. This is the other rather more well-behaved side, which I'm putting through at the same time. One of the beauties of a drum sander is by putting both pieces through together, or one after the other, with the same settings, you get two equally thicknessed pieces of wood. At the moment though, when I put this through, it doesn't touch the drum because the other piece is so much thicker. So this will get sanded in due course, but I'll keep checking whether the drum is low enough to touch this piece, but we'll keep going with the other piece for now. This is the flat one, the good piece, and what we're now finding is the drum sander's now touching this. I'm at a calibration of 10, so we've gone 1 1/4 revolutions. So we've, in theory, taken 0.9 of a millimetre off the other piece, but this piece is now just starting to get touched. So we can now just keep pushing both pieces through at the same time, and we'll end up with them both the same thickness. This is the cupped piece. This is the concave surface, and we've got to the point where I said we wanted to get to, where we've effectively done 50% of the work, in that this has been touched by the drum sander and the middle band hasn't. So what I will now do is flip it and go 50% on the other side, just touching the middle band, just to make it a little bit more stable so it doesn't tend to rock, and then we'll come back and we'll perfect this side, and hopefully we'll get to our result that way. that only took one pass. I've now touched the whole of this middle section. I feel that's nicely smooth and very slightly warm. There is some heat generated by this, but I try to work slowly so that we don't get too much heat, because heat will possibly warp the wood. I can feel there's a bit of a ripple down here, but now that we've done just the middle section, then we should find that the whole board sits a lot more stable, and we can perfect this side. It's got to the point where I'm going to give this just an eighth of a turn, I think. This is the good board, but it's not that good because I feel there's a little dip here. So what I've done, if you can see that, I've put pencil scribbles all over it, and we'll give it another pass, and we'll see when the pencil scribbles disappear down here, because I think when I put this through, it's only going to remove the pencil scribbles here and leave this. Actually, we don't need this edge, but I'm going to get the board perfect anyway. Well, the pencil's gone all the way across here, but I hope you can see. The light's a bit weird at the moment. There's a little bit of pencil left along this edge, so I'm going to keep going until all that pencil's disappeared. By contrast, we've got a little bit of a way to go yet with the bad piece. I have to get rid of this saw mark because we're going to need some of this. We can get rid of the bit with the hole in, but I will need to chop it about here, I think. Just checked with my template. So we've got a little bit of a way to go yet, but this is looking quite promising, and the bit by bit the main saw marks are all starting to disappear. Yeah, so just keep going. I'm really happy at this stage because it now looks like everything's achievable. We can get two 2mm sides that are good quality both sides. This is the supposedly bad piece on the bad side, and all that remains now is just this saw mark here. So another 0.1 and we'll be there. I think this is at the moment around 2.93mm, so we've got plenty of wood to work with, and we will be able to achieve a lovely 2mm board. That's the bad piece. The good piece, I've finished this side now. All the pencil marks are gone. I've got a nice, smooth, even side, so we can flip this and work on. You probably can't see this, but there's a few little ripples from the bandsaw, but this is all well achievable. The bad side's now finished and flat. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get rid of these saw marks because they are rather deep, and this piece has got to get cut off anyway. But the rest of it is lovely and flat, and we can flip it and carry on the other side and get the correct thickness. This is the other side of the bad piece. And I'm using chalk this time because it's far more visible. So we'll put that through, and you'll be able to see that I probably am just taking the middle off, and we're just going to get down to the edges. We're at about 2.5mm at the moment. A light pass has revealed that the good news that we've got a perfectly usable piece of wood with good sides on both sides, because these chalk marks indicate low spots, but we can remove those. We can just use the middle bit. So this is entirely usable as it is. It's 2.5mm, so we just have to go a little bit thinner and we're there. We're now within 0.1mm of thickness, 2.1mm, and as a very final pass, 4 passes in fact, without adjusting the height of the table. I'm just going to take it through again in each direction on each side, and that should give us a nice finish, as well as getting us thickness, but I'm not adjusting the height of the table. The back should be a lot more straightforward because it's flat. Although because I'm sanding such a large area, it might be difficult to push it through, but we'll see. First of all, I'm just going to get rid of the glue line on both sides, and when I've got a nice finish, I'll just keep pushing it through and just keep alternating and just gradually take it down. So that's cleaned the glue seam up nicely, and I've got a nice surface on both sides of the board, and it's now just a matter of taking it down to thickness. This is 3.7mm at the moment, so I've got to take it down to 2.5 I'm aiming for. I'm having to take it very slowly, just two little calibrations on the dial, which is about 1/10 of a turn, 0.07 of a millimetre. Any quicker and there's just too much force pushing you back at you, and I'm probably going to generate heat from the drum, but keeping it nice and slowly, we don't get any heat in the work, and everything's well under control. I'm now down to 2.7, so what I'll now do, again as with the sides, without adjusting the height of the table, I'm just going to keep pushing this through at the same height. There seems to be some sort of give, I don't know whether it's in the drum or the flexing of the table, but you can carry on putting it through and it will still take some material away, but very, very gently, and it will just give it'll improve the surface, although the surface at the moment is actually looking really good. But I'll just keep putting it through without adjusting the height, and hopefully that will get it both to dimension and a very good finish. Well, that went remarkably well in the end. 2.5. Well, it's over 2.5 millimeters. It's anywhere between 2.57, I think I read, on one of these devices, and 2.7 nearly. But that's fine. It's a little bit thinner than the top, but then this doesn't have the bridge attached, and this is going to have a 15-foot radius. The sides, I thought there was going to be great drama with the sides, but we're fine. It's worked out really well. They're 2 millimeters because they've got to go on a bending iron, so we're going a little bit thinner with them, and they'll be stronger anyway because they're curved, and it's yeah. Where do we go next? I'm not sure. I think I might be going back to inlay. At some point I'm going to have to bend the sides. I'm going to have to brace all of this. There's a lot of work to do, but a lot of choices. So whatever it is, make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!